The Denver Broncos received some potentially good news regarding inside linebacker Jonas Griffith. Could he be ready for a week one debut against the Seattle Seahawks to open up the regular season? Plus, in the preseason finale, who are some players on the offense and defensive side of the ball that Broncos country needs to keep their eye on this weekend against the Minnesota Vikings? You get that and much more in today's brand new episode, Locked on Broncos.
You are Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, Broncos country? Happy Friday. Welcome into a brand new episode, Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Thank you so much to everybody in Broncos country who tunes in to make Locked On Broncos their first listen of the day, whether they listen on their favorite audio podcasting platform or whether they listen on YouTube. We appreciate you so much. Continue to interact with us in the comments section and also hit that subscribe or that follow button so you never miss out on a day's worth of Denver Broncos news, content, coverage, and analysis every single day, all year long, courtesy Sayre Bedinger and myself here. Sayre, my friend, I am very excited about this weekend because it's another opportunity for some young guys to really lay claim to make a, kind of a hard decision for George Paton to say, hey, we can't cut this guy because he played really, really well. He offers some value to us. The preseason finale is approaching, but even more so exciting because the Broncos, one of their starters that they lost in the preseason, he could be back for the start of the regular season.
Couldn't be better news in terms of where we were kind of at with the timeline on linebacker Jonas Griffith after he dislocated his elbow, which to me, when I hear somebody's dislocated their elbow, Cody, I don't know about you, but to me, that kind of sounds awful. It sounds like that would put me out for at least a few months, if not longer, and all I do is play the guitar and talk with you about the Denver Broncos. So Jonas Griffith is a tough dude. And I know you mentioned earlier in the week that he was out there with his helmet on, still being active, an active participant at practice, even if he wasn't actively participating in practice with the rest of his teammates. So just great news for him to be able to get back out there because we know that he's going to be a key piece to this defense this year. Like he was kind of like the defensive star besides the obvious guys like Pat Surtain and Justin Simmons. He was kind of like the defensive star of training camp, right? He was out there flying around making plays every single day. So it'll be great to have him back, and hopefully he stays on track with this week one progression, really.
I mean, I was surprised to hear it as well because initially, he suffered the dislocated elbow in the Broncos' victory week one of the NFL preseason. And it was on the second play of the game, too, which was really unfortunate. And as you mentioned, he's been having a great training camp. He's been having a great offseason, really stepping into this role. There was no competition, really, for his spot. Like, he was the guy alongside Josie Jewell, and it appears that's going to be the case. But Broncos head coach Nathaniel Hackett told us on Wednesday before practice that the aiming point for him is to be ready week one against the Seattle Seahawks. And I think that there's going to be several things that probably need to be answered by the time that game comes around, right? And I think we alluded to it on yesterday's episode of the show a little bit. For a guy like Jonas Griffith, his responsibility as an inside linebacker, pre-snap, he's keying what the guard is. Obviously, he's looking at the formation. He knows what his assignment is. And then he's reading the guard. Is it run? Is it pass? And then he's reacting accordingly. If it's run, is this guy pulling? If so, I'm filling, and I'm trying to make it to where if this guy does his job, if there's a cutback, he'll run right into me. If it's pass, do I have any responsibility drop into a zone? Do I have to play any responsibility of man on a running back or on a tight end? These are those things. But also, part of like playing against the run means you're going to have to attack blocks. And so for a guy who dislocated his elbow, part of me wants to know and wonder, like, where is he going to get to the point before week one or leading up to week one where he's comfortable extending, making contact, right? That to me, I think, is really how it happened. And to be honest with you, I didn't quite get a chance to see, like, there's no good angle that shows how he dislocated his elbow. Was it from extending and trying to check a defender, or did he land wrong and someone landed on top of it? We don't even know that. So I think that's something I think will play a very interesting factor in his return. But you know what, Sarah? If he is ready week one, that's a huge boost for the Broncos because we were really bummed out. We're like, oh man, 4 to 6 weeks. He could miss some games into the regular season and potentially be back, maybe after week 3, week 4. Well, hey, now there's a chance he could play week one. And you know what? You're going to need it against the Seattle Seahawks. I think Jonas Griffith can be a difference maker on this defense. But yeah, I'm a little anxious to see how he maybe attacks the contact aspect with the elbow injury.
Well, we'll certainly be keeping a very close eye on that. And I think, too, it makes me think that, hey, maybe the Broncos kind of felt really good about his recovery process and that projection based on, we know they let go of Joe Schobert early in the week. So he was one of their 5 roster moves that they made to get the roster down from 85 to 80 players. And so that you let go of a veteran like that, a guy that you brought in really, I mean, because of that injury, right? The Jonas Griffith injury kind of paved the way for them to make that move. So I feel like, man, it's positive news all around. If Jonas Griffith is making that kind of progress in practice, shoot, I mean, I don't know if he have to wear like a big old brace on his arm or what. I know Rob Gronkowski, I feel like he wore a brace on his arm for like 10 years. And I was like, man, does that thing give him an advantage or what? Like, what is he wearing on his arm? So maybe Jonas Griffith can be like the defensive version of Rob Gronkowski with that. It's like, what is he somehow has this advantage, even though it's like he's injured, but he's got an advantage with this thing on his arm. It just makes him, more intimidating or something. I don't know, but hopefully all will be well with Jonas Griffith coming back from this injury. I don't know if there's even like, I'm no doctor. Is there like a degree? Somebody in the comments who's a doctor, like, are there degrees to dislocating your elbow? Like, is there one way to do it that's worse than others or better? I mean, certainly it seems crazy that he could be back this quickly, but it's very, very good news. If the Broncos can have their top 11 guys, Cody, I can't even stress this enough. It would be worth every single bit of none of those guys playing in the preseason if they're able to trot out their top 11 guys just for week 1. Because when is the last time we saw the top 11 guys for the Broncos offensively or defensively actually take the field? So if it can happen, hey, I'm here for it.
That's a great point. And I have no idea when the last time we saw that happen. But also, like, you with the idea, like, he plays with like a big elbow brace. Garrett Bowles has one, I know that. But like, if Jonas Griffith comes out, plays with that elbow brace, and let's just say he's a machine, he's flying all over the field, he's making tackles. You know what his nickname's going to be? The Terminator. I'm with it. I'm here for it. The Terminator,
Yes.
Jonas Griffith. I'm a big fan of nicknames, and I hope that that's something that does stick on because I think he's an absolute machine. And so, we'll see how that goes here, and we'll see whether or not he makes his debut week 1. The next couple of weeks are going to be very interesting because after the preseason finale, you have to cut the roster to 53, and then the Broncos will have some seldom practice. We won't necessarily get access to the entirety like we have been in training camp. We get a 20-minute viewing period, and then we get to go back to the media workroom and things like that. So be very interested to see how things go once we get to this portion of practice. But if Jonas Griffith returns, it will be huge news for this Denver Broncos football team. And Broncos country coming up here in just a moment. The Broncos will take on the Minnesota Vikings on Saturday in the preseason finale, 7 o'clock p.m. Mountain Time kickoff. You get all the coverage here, Lockdown Broncos. But who are some players that need to have a big game on the offensive side of the ball? We talk about that and much more coming up here in just a moment. But before we do that, let me tell you about our friends over there at Dave. And hindsight is 20/20, and you can't change the past. But what if you could get a little bit of help from your future self? Maybe you would ask to borrow a little cash. Well, now you can with Dave. Dave is the banking app that can help you get up to $500 instantly with extra cash. That's more money to fill your tank, to buy a wedding gift, or to catch up on bills. And you can finally tackle those expenses that have been stressing you out without any hangups. There's no interest and no credit check needed. Millions of people have already downloaded the Dave app to get the financial relief that they need with extra cash. So if you're in a pinch and you need some extra help, download Dave and think of it as a helping hand from future you. Download the Dave app from the App Store right now. That's DAVE, and sign up for an extra cash account and get up to $500 instantly. For terms and conditions, go to dave.com/legal. Instant transfer fees do apply. Banking provided by Evolve, member FDIC. Future you will thank you. Which players on the offensive side of the ball for the Broncos in their preseason finale against the Minnesota Vikings need to have a big game on Saturday? Thank you so much, Broncos country, for tuning in and making Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day every single day on your favorite audio podcasting platform, or whether you watch us on YouTube. If you, as a Broncos fan, know other Broncos fans that don't know about this podcast yet, share it with them. Expose them to Locked On Broncos. We're very excited to welcome anybody in Broncos country here. You have a voice at the table. Make sure you engage in the YouTube comment section down below, or make sure you tweet us on Twitter at Cody Roark NFL, at Sayre Bedinger. All right, Sayre, let's dive into the nuts and bolts here on the Broncos offensive side of the ball, the final game of the preseason. And it's all about, for so many of these guys, proving yourself and maybe making a claim to where you leave no stone unturned in the eyes. When George Paton and the coaching staff come together, they say, okay, hey, what are we doing here? Who we keeping? Who we cutting? And you want to make it to where there's like, well, what about this guy? And they're like, I don't want to cut this guy because this guy's he's busted his tail all through a training camp. He's balled out in the preseason. and there's a chance we lose him through waivers. Now there's an opportunity for a lot of guys. And I think we have to start off with who gets to start on Saturday at QB, and that is hashtag let it rip Brett Rippon.
Let it rip. I want to hear Brett Rippon. If there's if he could be mic'd up for this game, we need to hear him in the huddle, before the first play, be like, all right, let's ride, something like that. We need to get a let's ride from Brett Rippon. But man, I'm excited to see him go out there and do his thing. You're exactly right. It's an opportunity for all these guys to go out there and really for all of them to kind of let it rip. I mean, this is your opportunity to put on a show for George Paton and Nathaniel Hackett and for all 31 other NFL teams. Like we talked about earlier in the week, Cody, I feel pretty solid about the idea that Brett Rippon wouldn't make it through waivers without getting claimed by somebody. There's enough teams out there right now that need an upgrade at the backup quarterback position that I think if he goes out there against the Vikings and has a good game, I think there's a really good chance that he would get claimed on waivers. And Josh Johnson, he's not subject to waivers. So that makes it interesting if the Broncos are looking to keep 2 or 3 quarterbacks. Like I said before, I do feel like this is a game that these two guys are playing for one roster spot. And that's just my personal opinion on how they should build the roster. And that's what I see this as, Cody, is really an opportunity to go out there and take one out of the 53.
You got to go, like Brian Dawkins, you say you got to go out and take it. Like that always fires me up here. But, another guy that has an opportunity to do that is Jalen Virgil, the undrafted wide receiver out of Appalachian State. And I think if he comes out in this preseason finale, Sayre, and he has a big game. Now, the question is he going to get some run in the first half with the guy he's had a lot of chemistry with, and that's Brett Rippon? Or is he just going to be designated to really kind of that second half type of role where we see him on special teams in the first half type of thing? I think it's something to keep an eye on here. But for him, just continue to go out there and do what you've been doing. Make plays in the preseason and make it to where you leave no doubt in the coaching staff's mind, like, hey, you know what? This is a guy we absolutely need on our roster this year. He's a great insurance policy here at kick returner, not to mention at wide receiver. He can contribute in any way, shape, or form, and he's continuing to grow as well. So he's a guy that I've been a big fan of as well. And, he even got some love from KJ Hamler in Wednesday's press conference. I had a chance to ask KJ really just what he's kind of noticed with some of these other wide receivers in that room because they're a close unit. You mentioned Jalen Virgil specifically as, Jalen's got speed. Like he's a burner. He can get behind defenses, which also goes to kind of that role there that maybe KJ has behind him. So maybe a great insurance policy behind KJ. I know we've talked a lot about Montrell, but I think there's other things that Jalen Virgil and these guys can do. You're contributing in different facets here. And I think ultimately the fact that we're seeing Jalen Virgil play on special teams, we're seeing Jalen Virgil play on offense, I think says all we need to see. Now he just needs to go out there and he needs to continue to do it.
He does, and I think we're going to see that. I just have a feeling that he's going to go out there and be playing with the utmost confidence, moving the chains on third down, making plays. I hope the Broncos really heavily target him. I would love to see, I would love to see like 12 targets for Jalen Virgil in this game. Just really highlight him because if nothing else, ramp up the trade value. If the Broncos are hell-bent on keeping only 6 wide receivers, find a way to ramp up these guys' trade value and get them opportunities out there. That's what I want to see, and I specifically would love to see from Jalen Virgil and really have him go out and cement what I think you and I both believe, his roster status. And other guys on this team, they're not necessarily competing for 53-man roster spots. I think the writing is kind of on the wall for certain position groups like running back, where Devine Ozigbo, he's coming in as a guy that the Broncos just claimed off waivers from the New Orleans Saints, and he has a great opportunity to go and win that Demarie Crockett role where maybe you get called up for a few games. Go do your thing on special teams. Show what you can do as a runner. Be the only back really this preseason for the Broncos that has done a good job running the ball. I think he has a chance to go out there and do that. And it's a big game for Devine Ozigbo because the Broncos probably do want to keep him around. I know there's some history there. A good friend of mine named Eric Cody pointed out to me that that special teams coordinator Dwayne Stukes was on a defensive assistant with the Jacksonville Jaguars for 2 years while Devine Ozigbo was on that roster. So some familiarity there. He's seen Devine Ozigbo play some special teams, maybe that was a little bit of why they brought him in. So I think he has a chance to really go out there and make an impression.
He does more on special teams than, guys like Stevie Scott or even Jaquan Hardy. And I tell you what, he's big, Sayre. Like he's 6 foot, 225 pounds. And he looks hard to bring down, man. I tell you what, I would not want to have to be in the open field against him. I feel like I would definitely get run over in a situation like that. I'm excited to see maybe what he can do because obviously, coming in on such a short week and the final week of the preseason, maybe it's kind of like that secret weapon identity in a sense, like, hey, he didn't get a showcase much and he's not going to necessarily, but that's perfect for us because we want to bring him on the practice squad. And the fact that they claimed him off waivers tells me he's going to be on their practice squad, because I don't think they see much in guys like Jaquan Hardy at this point in terms of the running game and what they can add. I think Zigbo offers more just on the offensive side of the ball and also on special teams. But another name to watch will be Andrew Beck. There's been a lot of talk, and we even talked about it here on the show. I believe that if utilized the way that I think he can be, Andrew Beck could be one of these kind of like secret weapons on the offensive side of the ball. We saw what he can do as a receiver a little bit against the Houston Texans in 2019, but from that point forward, we didn't get to see that. However, when you factor in the tight end position and fullback, can you use one of those tight ends as a fullback, right? So for Andrew Beck, I think this is going to be a huge game for him. He needs to go out there and maybe showcase why he can be on this roster. I mean, outside of just even the special teams value that he does add, Denver's going to have to make a tough decision. And I don't know, like, this is a year where Andrew Beck may be one of those guys that gets cut. But I think because how less you see the fullback used in the NFL today, I think he'll be back, though, even if that were the case. So he needs to have a big game this weekend as well, I think, to really kind of solidify in the eyes of some fans and the coaches maybe what he can do on the offensive side of the ball. Broncos country, though, coming up here in just a moment. Sayre and I, we're going to take a look at defensive players who need to have a big game in Saturday's preseason finale against the Minnesota Vikings. But before we do that, let me tell you about BetOnline.net, the sponsor of today's episode, Locked On Broncos. BetOnline.net is the fastest and the easiest way to check in on all your betting needs. You can find all your favorite sports and events at the #1 online source for odds, lines, and games. You can find reviews and news of every league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, esports, and even golf. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all your sports wagering information, from live in-game betting, scores, and podcasts. They have you covered. Head to BetOnline today or use your mobile device to learn more about the action happening today. BetOnline, where the game starts. As the Denver Broncos close out their 2022 NFL preseason with a showdown against the Minnesota Vikings on Saturday in Power Field, Mile High, 7 o'clock p.m. Mountain Time kickoff, NFL Network, and locally on 9 News. Thank you so much, Broncos country, for tuning in and making Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day every single day, and your first watch, whether you watch us on YouTube as well. Hit that subscribe or that follow button so you never miss out on a day's worth of Broncos news, content, coverage, and more every single day, all year long. We appreciate you so much taking time out of your day to listen or to watch us. All right, let's dive into defensive players here to watch in Saturday's action here, Sayre. I think for Broncos country, linebackers definitely one of those areas. And I think for the most part, everyone's trying to figure out, can the Broncos defense bounce back from last week's performance against the Buffalo Bills? What better way to start than your linebackers, Alex Singleton and Justin Sternad, who have an opportunity to really solidify themselves as the two backers behind Josie Jewell and Jonas Griffith?
I think they do. I think the number one thing that those two guys have to do, in my opinion, Cody, is just go out there and make tackles. Don't miss tackles. I think that's one thing that we've seen the linebacker position really struggle with throughout the preseason here. And some guys to a higher degree than others, right? I mean, you can't just put all the blame. It's not guilty by association out there, but we have seen a lot of these guys missing tackles. And so it's kind of become a bit of a concern, right? And so that's why we start off the show by talking about how excited we are that Jonas Griffith is hopefully going to be okay for week 1, because really these backup linebackers have not showed. They showed that they're better than Joe Schobert, I suppose, but they haven't really shown that, man, if the Broncos need them for an extended period of time, do you really feel comfortable with them? I want to see them go out in this game against the Vikings and kind of prove like, okay, yeah, I feel way better now, even though it's a preseason game, even though it's preseason week 3, I feel way better about Alex Singleton and or Justin Sternad being a guy that the Broncos could really rely on if they need to at some point this season.
Well, now let's go to a guy off the edge, and that's going to be Aaron Patrick, another edge rusher, and a guy who's been playing some impact minutes on special teams from the onset here. He's got a high motor to him, and I think that between he and Jonathan Cooper, I think really is kind of the question, like, what do the Broncos do at edge rusher at this position? Maybe even throw Malik Reed's name in there a little bit. But really, it's like Aaron Patrick has a chance to go out there and maybe solidify that spot, because last year it was Andre Mintz who got this role. Aaron Patrick eventually got into it as well. Can he be back on the team again here this upcoming season? I think that you have to come out there and you have to fluster the opposing quarterback. If I'm not mistaken, we are not going to see Kirk Cousins. I know that he likes that. But I think we'll see a lot of Kellen Mond, who obviously has some athletic traits to him. And we'll see if, Mike Zimmer, was right in feeling maybe how he felt about Kellen Mond. But for Aaron Patrick and I think the edge rushers, it's going to be very critical for them to come out and ball out this game. What are your thoughts on Aaron Patrick? And then do you have any other players maybe that Broncos country should keep their eye on in Saturday's game?
Absolutely. Well, now I'm bummed that he can't go out there and sack Kirk Cousins and tell him you like that. I think that's gotta be the number one thing people say to that guy if he's laying on the ground looking up at him after they
I
sack him
I
is
wonder
you
if that's true.
it's
I
gotta
think about
be.
that all the time.
That would be really funny, actually. Somebody's got to have a mic'd up clip of that. But if not, I mean, some NFL defensive ends need to get on that. But Aaron Patrick, he does need to go out there and rush the quarterback. I know the Vikings just acquired Nick Mullins in a trade, and they have Sean Mannion and they have Kellen Mond. So there's going to be plenty of opportunity out there. I feel like the Broncos really took advantage of the backup quarterbacks for the Minnesota Vikings last year in the preseason. We'll see if they can do that again this year. I know it's a new staff in Minnesota. I know they've been running the ball very well in the preseason. Chris Cooper, our old friend with the Denver Broncos, he's now the offensive line coach there in Minnesota, and Ed Donatel is calling their defense. So a lot of familiar faces on that team. But man, Aaron Patrick and those edge rushers, they have an opportunity to go out there, cause some havoc. I think they have a good idea of what he can do on special teams. Now go out there and make some plays as a pass rusher. And speaking of making plays, Cody, I feel like I want to see just anybody in the secondary come up with a big play in this game. We saw last year the pick six that Pat Surtain had against the Vikings in the preseason. Let's see somebody go out there and make a big play. I mean, we've been talking all the offseason about Damari Mathis, Vion Hicks, these backup safeties, J.R. Reed, Delarian Turner-Yell. Who's going to go out there in this game and make a big play and make a statement for this roster or somebody else's? Because we know the Broncos need cornerback depth. We know that they need to solidify that position. Somebody in the defensive backfield's got to go out there and make a play.
And I'm even maybe thinking about a Minnesota Vikings player that Broncos country should keep an eye on. Nate Hairston, former Bronco. I mean, some people have told me that he's kind of on the edge, like on the roster edge in Minnesota with all their cornerback help that they have there. So if he maybe gets released, I'd be very shocked if they do not take a look at him, bringing him in inside the nickel, off of waivers, because the Broncos need some depth at that position. I firmly believe, and I know Sayre Bassey has a chance to really kind of solidify a spot this weekend as well. Interesting enough as well, Curtis Motkins is also in Minnesota. So it's just like a Broncos Vikings reunion for George Paton, obviously an organization he spent time with. I'm not sure. I don't think that there are many people left over in Minnesota from when George Paton was there. Obviously, after Rick Spielman was fired, they have a brand new GM, obviously a brand new coaching staff. So I wonder how close the ties are with Paton and Minnesota still, and whether they get some good intel. But some things to watch here on the defensive side of the ball for this Denver Broncos football team. Now, if you're watching this on YouTube, go in the comment section down below and let us know which players on offense and defense you want to see the Broncos have stand out in Saturday's preseason finale. I'll be there at the game. I'll drive over afterwards. Sayre and I will record a post-game recap here on the Locked On Broncos podcast. We'll have that for you up and ready Saturday morning for your morning cup of coffee. But we appreciate you so much, Broncos country, for tuning in and making Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day. Thank you so much for being a part of what we do every single day, covering this Denver Broncos team, breaking it down from every angle objectively, and giving Broncos fans the best content and coverage of all things Denver Broncos on the web today. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you for the post-game report, recapping the Broncos game against the Minnesota Vikings.